Welcome to the SAFeTY Chronicles, exploring how to keep people and pets safe from the cycle of interpersonal violence. I am your host, Allie Phillips, founder and CEO of Sheltering Animals and Families Together, the SAFeTY Program, a nonprofit organization working with domestic violence shelters to eliminate the pet housing barrier to safety. As the founder, I have led the global movement in helping domestic violence shelters create on-site pet housing while elevating the criminal justice response to how animal abuse links to crimes against people. I am a former prosecuting attorney, internationally recognized legal expert and public speaker, award-winning author, and advocate for protecting vulnerable victims. In this podcast, we will explore how and why animals are harmed in the cycle of family violence and the human-animal bond that keeps victims in harm's way with their pets. Guest speakers and I will share strategies for shelters and professionals working to safeguard survivors, why pet-inclusive sheltering is life-saving, and safety tips for those who need help. None of the content will be graphic. If you are in harm's way, please contact your nearest domestic violence shelter or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. So today I want to talk about cross-reporting and why this is really an important topic. And I am recording this shortly after the start of the new year. It's, kind of mid-March right now. And for most states, it is a new legislative session. So I want to talk about cross-reporting laws and what they are and who needs to do what. So you might want to get pen and paper or type this down, especially if you are one of these professions or if you are in a state where you are required. So cross-reporting laws address certain people or certain professions that either mandate or allow the reporting of suspected harm to another. Now, these laws are broken down into two categories: mandatory and discretionary cross-reporting. And they typically involve the reporting of animal abuse, child abuse, and elder abuse. Surprisingly, very little regarding domestic violence, except for 6 states that mandate that healthcare report domestic violence and sexual assault to the police. Now, mandatory cross-reporting requires that certain people and professions must report to the appropriate agency if they suspect a specific type of abuse. So if they suspect child abuse or elder abuse or animal abuse. And it's mandatory. It's not, well, I'm busy or I'm not really sure. It's not. It's mandatory if you suspect. So, for example, all medical doctors in all states are mandated reporters of suspected child abuse. Okay, that's been in effect for several decades. But did you know that there are 18 states plus Puerto Rico that mandate that all people report suspected child abuse? All people. So that includes animal protection, veterinarians, the lady working at Walmart, the guy working at the bowling alley, your neighbor, everybody. And those states are, take note if this is one of yours, because you are a mandated reporter of suspected child abuse if you are in one of these: Delaware, Florida, Idaho, Indiana, Kentucky, Maryland, Mississippi, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Puerto Rico, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. What I have found when I teach on this, and I have been teaching on this topic for 2 decades, I find that a lot of professionals who come into contact with human and animal victims of abuse, they're actually unaware in these states that they are required to report child abuse. So that's why this is a really important topic. And I don't expect anyone to go out there and start researching your state laws. I'm actually going to put in the the notes below some links that you can go to and get more information. Now, when it comes to discretionary reporting, this is permissible, but it's not mandated that a person or a professional report. And typically, if they do report, they are protected from civil liability if they are wrong. Because I think a lot of people just look at abuse and neglect and they're like, I could be wrong. That's where the discretionary laws come in. Now, the mandatory laws have the same protection, but the discretionary laws say you can report if you want to, you don't have to. But if you do and you're wrong, you will have protection from civil liability. Now, here's the thing, and this is where my lawyer brain goes. In general, anyone can report a suspected crime, and anyone should, honestly. And if you do so in good faith, you'll be fine. As an attorney, I understand the immunity from, being protected from legal action in those discretionary reporting laws, but honestly, anyone can report. So these laws really lack teeth and simply say, you can report if you want to, but you don't have to. So honestly, they really don't mean much. But yet a lot of people fall back on, well, I need to be protected if I report. There's no idea how many lawsuits have been filed because somebody was wrong in reporting, but I would guess as an attorney, they are minuscule, incredibly low. And like I said, if you report in good faith, you'll be fine. Now, in the description below, I'm going to put a couple of links to help you identify if you are a mandated or a discretionary reporter based on your profession and based on where you live. So be sure to look at that and click on those links. And this is complimentary of the National Link Coalition, which I have been a part of since 2008 when it was created. So for about 2 decades, state laws and individual agency protocols have started to recognize that both animal and human protection agencies should make a report to each other when a situation of abuse becomes known. And while there has been some resistance to mandated cross-reporting or having protocols, this is usually due to concerns of confidentiality constraints, what an agency can share with another agency. I've heard concerns about full caseloads and the staff being overburdened. But agencies who cross-report see the benefits because they are reaching people that they might not otherwise have known about. The goal of cross-reporting is not for a professional in one field to conduct an investigation in an area outside of their field of expertise. It's not for a child protection professional to investigate animal abuse. That's not how it works. It is simply to understand what might be considered maltreatment and to know whom to call to report it. That's what cross-reporting is. And a lot of times when you're looking at abuse and neglect of a person or an animal, you know it when you see it. And you just need to know who to call. And when various agencies come together to learn about cross-reporting, to talk about cross-reporting, their response to families in need will be much more efficient because those agencies are no longer working in silos. Whenever agencies are working in silos, things fall through the cracks. People and animals fall through the cracks. I know that was something that came to light after 9/11, that the law enforcement agencies were not sharing and communicating. So that's why this is really important. Now, these laws are important for a number of reasons. Number one, any agency or person who's working to protect adults, children, animals from harm must be allowed the right to report outside the scope of what they are investigating and to be protected. I have said this repeatedly in all of my trainings that I give at conferences. Violence is violence, no matter who it is committed against. When there is violence in a home, no one is safe. But sometimes agencies are unaware that there is a home in crisis until another agency reports on it. So when a first responder goes into a home, whoever that is, it could be animal protection, it could be child protection. If they see something that looks like suspected maltreatment, they must be allowed the right to document it and report it to the appropriate agency. That's why these laws are important. Because can you imagine going into a home? You have a job to do. But while you're in that home, you see something that is not okay and is probably criminal. But you are prohibited from sharing that with the people who can actually do something about it. Could you imagine being in that position? And then because you're not allowed to do anything, someone gets really hurt or someone is killed. That's why this is not okay. And this is why the mandatory laws are important. So a second reason is these agencies, human and animal protection, are often working with the same family. So it's important that they work together for a coordinated response. So, a child protection worker goes into a home to check on a specific child, and in the process, they see a very injured and neglected dog. Of course, they should report what is happening to that dog. They do not have to make the conclusion of whether it is abuse or neglect, but they need to report it to those who can make that determination so that that home can get help. But many do not report, and many agencies do not encourage their workers to report. As a prosecutor, I have always had issue with that because, and I used to say this all the time, on all my cases, I was the mouthpiece. I was the mouthpiece in the courtroom, but my eyes and ears were in the homes. If the people with the eyes and the ears are not getting the information to me as a prosecutor, there's nothing I can do because I literally know nothing about it. So these agencies are already working together, and whether there are laws or not, they need to be encouraged to continue working together and cross-report. And then a third reason why this is important is that cross-reporting protects and saves more adults, more children, and more animals from harm. It is the first person in the door who sees what's happening, and they should be allowed and required to make a report because it's the right thing to do. Many times it's animal protection in the front door. I mean, imagine if child protection showed up at your door. A lot of people don't want to open the door. Or if law enforcement shows up, it's intimidating. But when animal protection shows up, sometimes they have arrest powers, sometimes they don't. But they can often get into a home sooner than anybody else. And that's why in all the trainings I've done, in all the publications I've written, I have always said the first person in the door is the one that needs to make the report. They need to notify the agency that is appropriate for what that first responder saw. Now, I mentioned that cross-reporting domestic violence is limited right now to medical professionals in 6 states. Why is that? Well, the short story is that the dynamics of domestic violence may require a victim to put together a safety plan for themselves, their children, and their pets before they can leave. If there is a report before they are ready, that can actually escalate the violence. However, if child or animal protection encounters a domestic violence victim, they should be prepared to quietly offer resources, phone numbers, and services that are available, to give them information about safety planning for themselves, their kids, and their pets. And here's the thing, if the agencies are not working together, they won't have that information to share, and this will not happen. So when when I look at legislation that addresses cross-reporting, I went back and I looked at 2024's legislative session. We're just like 10 weeks into 2025. So when I look at 2024, there were not that many cross-reporting bills filed. All right, let me run through just a couple of these because some passed, some didn't. Iowa had a bill that died at the close of the session that would have granted immunity to veterinarians who assist law enforcement in investigating animal abuse cases. You would think that would be okay. You would think this would be a no-brainer, especially for a veterinarian, but there is a real fear among veterinarians that they will be sued for it. So this is why we need the mandatory laws. In Massachusetts, they had House Bill 4911 that did pass to allow child and adult protective service workers to report suspected animal abuse at any time, not just during their investigation, at any time. So that's a win. Here in my home state of Michigan, there was a bill requiring child protective workers to report suspected animal abuse, but it didn't go anywhere. Missouri had 3 bills that died at the end of the session that would have required animal control officers, humane investigators, and child protective services to cross-report to each other. But those didn't go anywhere. Same in New Jersey. They had a bill that didn't go anywhere that would have allowed child protective services to report animal abuse. New York had a bill that didn't go anywhere that would have required those who enforce animal protection laws to also report suspected child abuse. Didn't go anywhere. Tennessee did pass a law allowing veterinarians to report animal cruelty. That stuns me because you would think that veterinarians would just be reporting animal cruelty, but they just got their law in 2024. And then Utah passed a law protecting veterinarians from civil liability for reporting animal abuse. So I'd like to highlight at this point the cross-reporting by veterinarians for just a minute. Because one comment I have heard from veterinarians is that they are hesitant to report because they are concerned about losing a client and they're concerned about being sued. This was a concern of doctors when mandatory child abuse reporting took effect, like in the 1980s. But the concerns really didn't pan out. They didn't materialize. Veterinarians can sometimes be the first to know that something is not okay in a home. And we need to talk to them and we need to help them understand that reporting is a good thing. Because veterinarians see companion animals that come in with non-accidental injuries and come in with neglect. If nothing is done when abuse or neglect is suspected, the veterinarian could actually lose their client because their client, the pet, could be killed, or the non-offending caregiver who's bringing the pet in for services may not be allowed to bring the pet in anymore because that could be a control mechanism that happens in domestic violence. So veterinarians are very, very important, and we need to really work on this to help them and get these laws in place for them. So because veterinarians really are first responders and sometimes are the first to see what's happening in the home, it is important for veterinarians to do a couple of things. So if you know a veterinarian, please share this podcast with them. So number one, they need to look at the family that's bringing in the pet. Obviously, they're going to take care of the pet, but they need to look at who is bringing in the pet. Any adults, any kids. Are there obvious signs of abuse? Is there bruising, cuts, lacerations, broken limbs, behavior that makes you concerned? That's number one. Number two, as a veterinarian, you need to get a full description of how the injury happened. Literally write it or type it into your notes word for word as it's being said. Because this is going to be really important if law enforcement eventually becomes involved, because they are going to take your notes, and when they do interviews, they're going to cross-reference that information with what they gather. If there are inconsistencies, which usually they are, if somebody is lying to cover up something, That's a major red flag of a problem. As a prosecutor, I want to see word for word what your client said to you about why this cat came in with two broken limbs, because that just doesn't happen. That just really doesn't happen. It's pretty rare. So, word for word as best as you can. Number three, take photographs of the injuries, not just x-rays. And please take photographs of the injuries and videotape the animal's demeanor. Everybody has a cell phone. Everybody has the capacity to take a videotape. Videotape the animal's demeanor in your clinic, especially around family members. Now, you don't necessarily have to get the family members on video, because based on your state law, there could be some privacy rights, even though a vet clinic is open to the public, but I don't want to get into that right now. But you can take a video without having the family in it, but solely focused on the animal's demeanor. Do they cower? Do they cringe around a specific family member? Like, have you noticed a behavior change? Document all of that and take photos and videotapes. And then number four, if as a veterinarian you feel that the injury was non-accidental, that this was intentional, or there is neglect happening, whether you have a cross-reporting law or not, it is vitally important that you call law enforcement in your jurisdiction, whatever the law enforcement agency is that investigates animal abuse. Because here's the thing, if you're already thinking, but Allie, what if they sue me? We don't have a law. I don't have protection. What if I lose my client? Well, your client's going to be dead. I'm sorry to be blunt. And that's what I say to veterinarians. I've even said it to my veterinarian. I've had many veterinarians for my cats over the years, and I talk to them about this. And I'm just blunt, and I'm like, well, your client's going to be dead. And then how are you going to feel? If you are reporting in good faith, do not worry about it. You could be saving a life. Okay? All right. So what can you do if you're like, well, I'm not in a profession where I'm working with humans or animals, or I'm not, in the state where everybody's a mandated reporter? What can you do? Number one, and I'm going to put links below. Sign up to get the National Link Coalition newsletter. This is a coalition of national organizations that come together and we work on the link between violence to animals and violence to people. I represent the pet-friendly domestic violence shelters in that coalition. There is a monthly newsletter, and all legislation that is filed related to protecting adults, protecting children, protecting animals, cross-reporting, therapy animals, anything that blends animals and people together is in that newsletter. So you will know if there is legislation for you to take action on. Because when you see a bill that is pending in your state, contact your state House rep or senator to show your support. And if you feel strongly, contact the bill sponsor to offer your support and ask to testify if there is a hearing, especially if you have important information to share. Number two, visit mandatedreporter.com. I'll put the link below, and that's where you will know what your legal obligations are in your state. And the National Link Coalition recently worked with this site to get animal abuse reporting on there. Number three, if you work for an agency or a business that helps people or pets, ask your director, your supervisor, what your reporting responsibilities are. If the responsibilities are different than your state law, bring that to the attention of your supervisor, because you want to comply with state law. You do not want to get into trouble in that regard. If you are not required to report, ask your supervisor if a policy change can happen to allow that or to require it. I mean, it just really baffles me when veterinarians are not permitted to report animal abuse. That just absolutely makes no sense to me. Okay, so how we make change is to make change one agency and one business at a time. Because with the mandated reporting laws, if you are mandated and you don't report, you can actually get in trouble for failing to report. So we've got to pull this all together, and we've got to start educating people on what their duties are because it literally is the right thing to do. I just cannot say that enough. Imagine the lives that you could save by knowing what your requirements are in your state or your profession. And then number four, if you don't work for an agency or a business that helps people or pets, but you see maltreatment happening, please call 911. If you are wrong, the chances of being sued in civil court for damages is infinitely small. It is so minuscule, but what if you're right? You could save a life. All right. That's my message for today. Thanks so much for being here and listening. And please share this with someone who may be a mandated reporter, or they work with children, they work with animals, they work with adults. This is really important information to know. And if you work for an agency and want cross-reporting training, just reach out. If I can't do it, I will find you someone who can. All right. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you are in harm's way and need help, please visit the Pet Inclusive Shelter listing at SAFeTYProgram.org, call your nearest domestic violence shelter, or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Want to support our efforts and help us keep the SAFeTY Startup Manual free for domestic violence shelters? Consider donating at SAFeTYProgram.org/donate. Your donation saves lives.